The site where the Ark of the Covenant was known to have been stored in Israel for 2 decades is about to be excavated for the very first time.
How the Ark of the Covenant was built and how it was really used. What if the most mysterious object in the Bible wasn't only a spiritual symbol, but a carefully designed masterpiece created under extreme conditions? In the harsh wilderness of Sinai, a newly freed nation received highly detailed instructions to build something sacred, a chest made from acacia wood and covered inside and out with pure gold. The measurements were exact. The materials were specific. There was absolutely no room for mistakes. This was the Ark of the Covenant. But think about it. How do you build a gold-covered structure in the middle of the desert without modern tools, machinery, or a proper workshop? How do you measure everything precisely enough to follow divine instructions down to the smallest detail? And why was this object treated with such seriousness that touching it improperly could mean death? Inside the Ark were 3 deeply significant items: the stone tablets of the law, Aaron's staff that miraculously blossomed, and a jar of manna preserved as a testimony for future generations. Together, they symbolized God's covenant, His appointed authority, and His daily provision. The Ark wasn't simply moved from place to place, it was guarded. It wasn't casually transported, it was approached with reverence and caution. It stood at the heart of Israel's worship, shaped their battles, and defined their identity as a people. When it was present, morale soared. When it was mishandled, consequences followed immediately. And then, one day, it disappeared. Was it destroyed during an invasion? Hidden deep beneath Jerusalem? Carried to a distant land? And if it were ever uncovered again, what would that mean? In this video, we're going to explore how the Ark was constructed, how it was actually used, and why its mystery continues to fascinate the world thousands of years later. Stay with us as we uncover the full story. Now consider the challenge they faced. They had no real workshop, no precision instruments, no advanced equipment, and very little time. Yet they were expected to create detailed craftsmanship in pure gold, the kind of work that normally takes a lifetime of experience to master. How could former slaves accomplish something so extraordinary? The answer was unexpected. God chose a man named Bezalel from the tribe of Judah and filled him with His Spirit for a specific purpose: to build. Bezalel is described as the first person in Scripture to be filled with God's Spirit, not to lead an army, not to deliver prophecies, but to create with skilled hands. He was given understanding and ability to work with gold, silver, and bronze. He knew how to cut and set stone, how to carve wood with accuracy, and how to transform raw materials into something sacred. Bezalel was around 30 years old when he was appointed, and he didn't work alone. Oholiab from the tribe of Dan was chosen to assist him, contributing his own craftsmanship and expertise. But even with remarkable skill and dedication, one enormous question still remained. Where would they find the materials to build something so valuable in the middle of the wilderness? Where would runaway slaves in the wilderness find enough gold to overlay an entire chest, inside and out? The answer goes back to the night they left Egypt. Before their departure, the Israelites asked the Egyptians for silver, gold, and clothing. And the Egyptians, eager to see them go and fearing further disaster, gave generously. Scripture describes it as plundering Egypt, not through theft, but as long overdue compensation for 400 years of forced labor. When the time came to build the tabernacle and its sacred furnishings, the people responded with overwhelming generosity. They brought real gold, earrings, bracelets, necklaces, personal treasures that were melted down and refined. In fact, they brought so much that Moses eventually had to tell them to stop giving. There was more than enough, but gold was only the beginning. The list of materials God required went far beyond what anyone might have imagined. Fine fabrics, precious stones, rare woods, special oils, and carefully prepared incense. This wasn't just a construction project. It was a sacred design, detailed and intentional, calling for excellence in every part. And the deeper you look into that list, the more remarkable the entire process becomes. God specifically asked for acacia wood. one of the few trees that could survive in the harsh conditions of the Sinai desert. It wasn't an ordinary material. Acacia is extremely hard, dense, and resistant to decay. In other words, it was strong enough to endure years of travel through the wilderness. If the ark was going to be carried for decades, it needed to be built from something that wouldn't easily crack or rot. But the wood was only the beginning. God also required fine linen and threads dyed in blue, purple, and deep red. There was goat hair, ram skins, dyed red, and other carefully selected materials. None of this was random. Every fabric served a purpose. Every color carried meaning. The design wasn't just practical, it was symbolic. And here's a detail many people overlook. In the ancient world, purple dye was incredibly rare and unbelievably expensive. Producing even a tiny amount required thousands of sea mollusks. Gram for gram, it could be worth more than gold. Purple wasn't just a color, it was a symbol of royalty, wealth, and authority. And yet, God required entire threads of it for the tabernacle. So where would a group of former slaves in the middle of the desert find something like that? Most likely, they brought it with them from Egypt. Egypt traded with Phoenician merchants who specialized in producing luxury dyes. When the Israelites asked the Egyptians for clothing and valuables before leaving, they didn't list specific items. The Egyptians handed over fine garments and costly fabrics, materials normally reserved for royalty and nobility. What once symbolized Egyptian power was now being repurposed for something sacred. Bezalel took all of it, the acacia wood, the refined gold, the rare fabrics, and began assembling the ark according to the exact instructions given to Moses. He overlaid the wood with gold, inside and out. He shaped and measured and crafted with extreme care. But this wasn't just a beautiful object. It was something so sacred that touching it improperly could cost a person their life. So how did he manage to build it without being struck down? The first and most critical rule was precision. The measurements had to be exact, about 1.15 meters long, 70 centimeters wide, and 70 centimeters high. Not a little more, not a little less. The dimensions weren't suggestions. They were specific commands given by God. There was no room for approximation, no space for guesswork. Every cut of wood, every layer of gold, every detail had to match the instructions perfectly. Because when something is built for a sacred purpose, precision isn't optional, it's everything. Bezalel began by cutting the acacia wood with extreme care. Without modern rulers or measuring tools, he likely used ropes marked with evenly spaced knots, a precise Egyptian method of measurement he may have learned simply by observing skilled craftsmen during Israel's years in Egypt. Every plank had to be cut to exact dimensions. There was no room for rough edges or uneven sides. But shaping the wood was only the first step. God had commanded that the ark be overlaid with pure gold, not just on the outside, but on the inside as well. And that's where the real technical challenge began. Pure gold is beautiful, but it's also very soft. You can't just attach thick slabs of it onto wood and expect it to hold. Bezalel had to hammer the gold carefully, shaping it into thin sheets. If he made it too thick, it wouldn't mold properly to the wood. Too thin, and it could tear or crack with the slightest pressure. It required incredible balance, strength and gentleness at the same time. Once the gold was shaped, it had to be secured. He may have used tiny gold nails, carefully placed so they wouldn't damage the structure, or natural resins to bond the metal to the wood. Every surface had to be completely covered. There couldn't be a single exposed section of acacia. No gaps, no flaws. Because this wasn't just about appearance. The ark was meant to be wholly set apart, covered in purity inside and out. If any wood remained visible, it would mean the work was incomplete. And when something is built according to divine instruction, incomplete simply isn't acceptable. What Bezalel was doing wasn't just carpentry or metalwork. It was sacred craftsmanship, and every single detail mattered. The ark was built in 3 complete layers. At its core was solid acacia wood. Then it was overlaid with pure gold on the inside. And finally, it was covered again with pure gold on the outside. Wood in the center, gold within, gold without. This design made the ark extremely heavy, estimated at around 150 kilograms. It wasn't something a single person could lift casually. In fact, it wasn't meant to be carried by hand at all. Poles were inserted through gold rings on its sides so it could be transported properly without direct contact. Along the top edge, Bezalel crafted a gold molding, a raised border running around the rim. It wasn't just decorative. It likely strengthened the structure and protected the edges from damage while the ark was being moved through rough terrain. Now here's an interesting perspective that some modern researchers have pointed out. When you look at the ark's structure, gold on the inside, wood in the middle, gold on the outside, it resembles what we would today call a conductor-insulator-conductor system. Gold conducts electricity, wood acts as an insulator, and gold conducts again. In modern terms, that's similar to the basic structure of a capacitor, a device that can store electrical charge. Some have speculated that as the ark was carried across the dry desert environment, static electricity could have built up. In theory, a layered structure like that could store energy, almost like a primitive battery. On top of the ark, Bezalel was instructed to craft 2 cherubim out of hammered gold facing each other with wings spread. If you think about how electrical discharge works, how energy tends to concentrate at pointed or raised surfaces, some have compared this design to the way a Tesla coil focuses electrical energy at a specific point. According to this theory, if someone improperly touched the ark while a charge had built up, a powerful discharge could occur, potentially deadly and seemingly without explanation. Now, it's important to understand that this is a modern interpretation trying to explain ancient events through scientific concepts. The Bible presents the ark's power as sacred and divine, not mechanical. But the design itself, layered materials, precise construction, specific handling instructions, continues to fascinate both theologians and researchers today. Whether viewed spiritually, symbolically, or scientifically, one thing is clear. The ark was not an ordinary object. It was built with intention, precision, and profound reverence. At the time, Bezalel wasn't thinking about scientific theories or future debates. He simply knew he had to finish the final piece, the lid. And what he was about to shape would become the most sacred and feared space in Israel. The ark itself was complete, but it was still empty. Then came the part that has fascinated people for centuries: what was placed inside it and why those items mattered so much. The first were the tablets of the law, 2 stone tablets inscribed by God on Mount Sinai. These weren't symbolic replicas. They were considered the original covenant, the 10 commandments written by the very hand of God. But they weren't the first set. When Moses first descended the mountain carrying the original tablets, he found the people worshipping a golden calf. In anger and heartbreak, he threw the tablets down and they shattered. Later, God instructed Moses to carve 2 new stone tablets. Moses brought them up the mountain and God wrote the commandments again. These second tablets were the ones placed inside the ark. But the ark held more than stone. It also contained Aaron's rod. At one point, the Israelites began questioning Aaron's authority as high priest. To settle the dispute, God instructed that each of the 12 tribes bring a rod, 1 staff representing each tribe. The rods were placed overnight before the tabernacle. The next morning, 11 rods were exactly as they had been, dry, lifeless wood. But Aaron's rod had changed. In a single night, it had sprouted buds, blossomed, and even produced ripe almonds. A dead branch had come to life. This was taken as a clear sign that God had chosen Aaron. God commanded that the rod be kept inside the ark as a lasting witness. The third item was manna, the mysterious bread that appeared on the ground each morning during Israel's 40 years in the wilderness. The people gathered only what they needed for each day. If they tried to keep extra overnight, it spoiled and filled with worms. Yet the portion placed inside the ark did not rot. It remained preserved, without refrigeration, without preservatives, as a testimony to God's provision. So inside the ark were three powerful symbols: the tablets representing God's law, the rod representing spiritual authority, the manna representing divine provision. Together, they told the story of covenant, leadership, and daily dependence on God. But possessing these sacred objects didn't make the ark something casual or approachable. Quite the opposite. The ark came with strict, detailed instructions. It was never to be treated as ordinary. No one could simply lift it and carry it away. Only specific Levites, from the priestly line, were permitted to transport it. Even they could not touch the ark directly. Poles were inserted through rings so it could be carried without contact. And before any movement of the ark, there was preparation. Ritual purification was required. Washing with specially prepared water, offerings presented at the altar, periods of fasting, abstinence, days set aside to ensure spiritual and ceremonial cleanliness. Why such seriousness? Because approaching the ark carelessly wasn't just seen as a personal risk. It was believed to endanger the entire community. The ark represented the presence of God among the people. To mishandle it was not simply a mistake. It was a violation of something holy. In that world, holiness wasn't symbolic. It was real, powerful, and not to be taken lightly. Whenever the camp of Israel had to move, transporting the ark was never rushed or casual. It followed a very specific process. First, the priests would enter the holy place. They would carefully take down the inner curtain, the veil that separated the most holy place from the rest of the tabernacle. That same curtain would then be used to cover the ark itself. Over that, they placed a protective covering made from durable sea animal skins. And finally, a blue cloth was spread over everything. Only after the ark was completely covered would the carrying poles be inserted into the gold rings on its sides. Those steps weren't optional. They were commands. And ignoring them had serious consequences. Only Levites were permitted to carry the ark, and even they were never allowed to touch it directly. The poles were the only approved method of transport. 2 men on each side would lift it onto their shoulders and walk in step together. The system was designed to prevent direct contact at all costs, because if someone stumbled, if the ark shifted suddenly, human instinct might take over. And that's exactly what happened in one tragic moment in Israel's history. When King David was bringing the ark back to Jerusalem, he made a critical mistake from the very beginning. Instead of having Levites carry it properly with poles, they placed the ark on a new cart pulled by oxen. It probably seemed practical and efficient. It may even have felt respectful. But it wasn't what had been commanded. As the cart moved along, everything appeared fine, until the oxen stumbled. The cart shook violently, and the ark began to slide. A man named Uzzah, who was walking beside it, saw the danger. Instinctively, he reached out his hand to steady the ark. The moment he touched it, he died. The account makes it clear. This wasn't described as an accident or simple misfortune. It was seen as a direct violation of a clear instruction. The ark was never meant to be transported that way, and it was never meant to be touched. But the ark wasn't only associated with danger during transport. It also played a powerful role during times of war. When Israel went into battle, the ark sometimes went with them, not as a magical object, but as a symbol of God's presence and covenant. Its presence carried immense psychological weight. Both Israelites and their enemies understood what it represented. Before any military action, leaders would seek guidance from God. They would stand before the ark, and the high priest would consult the Urim and Thummim, sacred objects kept in his breastplate. Through them, a clear answer was sought: proceed or do not proceed. If the answer was no, and they ignored it, defeat was almost certain. The ark was never meant to be a charm or a guarantee of victory. It was a reminder that success depended on obedience. Even its placement in battle was carefully chosen, handled with reverence and fear. In every situation, whether in worship, travel, or war, one truth remained the same. The ark was not ordinary. It demanded precision, respect, and complete obedience. And history shows that when those boundaries were crossed, the consequences were immediate. The ark was never placed recklessly on the front lines where it could easily be captured. It stayed positioned behind the army, protected, yet visible enough that both the Israelites and their enemies knew it was present. That visibility mattered. For Israel, the ark symbolized that God was with them. It strengthened morale and gave them confidence. For their enemies, it created fear. They had heard the stories. They knew what the ark represented. Its presence alone could shift the emotional balance before a battle even began. One of the most famous examples is the fall of Jericho. At the time, Jericho was heavily fortified. Its walls were massive, estimated to be several meters thick, making the city seem nearly impossible to conquer by conventional military methods. But instead of launching a direct attack, the strategy was unusual. For 6 days, the ark was carried around the city once each day. 7 priests walked ahead of it, blowing trumpets. The army followed in silence. On the 7th day, they circled the city 7 times. After the final round, the priests blew their trumpets and the people shouted together with one unified cry. According to the biblical account, the walls collapsed. What makes the story even more fascinating is an archaeological detail discovered during excavations in the 1950s. Researchers found evidence suggesting that sections of Jericho's walls had fallen outward rather than inward, which is unusual, since walls typically collapse inward during a siege or external assault. Some have proposed natural explanations, perhaps seismic activity, structural weakness, or even a form of resonance created by synchronized sound and movement. Others see it as a miraculous act beyond normal physical explanation. Whatever conclusion one reaches, the story highlights something powerful. The ark was never treated as a simple object. It represented divine authority, covenant, and presence. And whether through faith, psychology, or events we still debate today, its role in Israel's history left a lasting impression. And for some researchers, the mystery doesn't end there. Some modern thinkers have suggested an unusual theory. If the ark truly acted like a massive capacitor, storing electrostatic energy because of its gold-wood-gold layered design, then the coordinated sound of trumpets and thousands of voices shouting together might have triggered a powerful discharge. 7 trumpets producing a strong, unified tone. An entire crowd shouting at the same moment. In theory, that kind of synchronized vibration could release stored energy in a sudden burst. It sounds like something out of science fiction. Yet, when you look at the ark's design, conductive gold on the inside and outside, insulating wood in the center, and the 2 cherubim rising above the lid, some argue it resembles a device capable of storing and concentrating energy. But whether someone views that as symbolism, speculation, or literal physics, there's an important pattern in the biblical narrative. The ark was never portrayed as a weapon Israel could control. It only brought victory when the people were obedient. There's a powerful example of this. At one point, Israel went to battle against the Philistines and decided to bring the ark with them, assuming it would guarantee success. But they were not living faithfully at that time. Instead of seeking God's guidance, they treated the ark like a lucky charm. The result was disastrous. About 30,000 Israelite soldiers were killed, and the ark itself was captured by the Philistines. But capturing it did not bring the Philistines victory. According to the account, wherever they placed the ark, trouble followed. Plagues, panic, and devastation. What seemed like a military triumph quickly turned into something far worse. They eventually returned it, realizing it was not an object they could control or exploit. Beyond battle, there was another moment when the ark's power was treated with the utmost seriousness. Once a year, on the Day of Atonement, the most sacred and dangerous ritual in Israel's religious life took place. This was the only day anyone could enter the Holy of Holies, the inner sanctuary where the ark rested. And only one person in the entire nation was permitted to go inside, the high priest. No one else could enter, not out of curiosity, not out of devotion, not for any reason. The high priest had to prepare carefully, with sacrifices, purification rituals, and precise procedures before stepping behind the veil. The understanding was clear. Entering carelessly or without authorization meant death. The ark was never ordinary. Whether in craftsmanship, transport, battle, or worship, it represented something sacred and untouchable, a reminder that divine presence was not something to be handled lightly. Even for the high priest, entering the Holy of Holies was not something done casually or quickly. The preparation alone took days. Before the Day of Atonement, the high priest separated from his family and stayed near the temple, preparing through ritual washings, study, and strict rehearsal. Every detail had to be perfect. There was no room for mistakes. On the day itself, he wore simple white linen instead of gold, symbolizing humility. First, he sacrificed a bull for his own sins. Then, he carried burning coals and sacred incense behind the veil into the Holy of Holies. The incense wasn't symbolic. It was necessary. Its thick smoke filled the chamber, forming a protective cloud over the ark. Without it, he was believed to die. Every ingredient and action had to be exact. Afterward, he sprinkled sacrificial blood inside to atone for the nation's sins. The time inside was brief, perhaps 15 minutes, but he stood completely alone in the most sacred place in Israel. It was a moment of extreme responsibility and danger, showing how seriously holiness was understood in the ancient world. Over time, some Jewish traditions claimed a rope was tied to the high priest's ankle when he entered the Holy of Holies, so his body could be pulled out if he died. Most scholars believe this detail comes from later writings, not the original texts. Still, the danger was real. No one else could simply enter that sacred space. This ritual, performed yearly on the Day of Atonement, was the most sacred ceremony connected to the ark. It involved blood, incense, prayer, and humility. Then, suddenly, the ark disappeared. In 586 BC, Babylon destroyed Jerusalem and burned Solomon's temple. But when they entered the Holy of Holies, the ark was gone. To this day, three main theories remain. Some believe it was destroyed by the Babylonians, though no records clearly mention it. Others think priests hid it beneath the Temple Mount, where tunnels and sealed chambers may still exist but cannot be explored due to religious tensions. A third tradition claims it was taken to Ethiopia, where the Ethiopian Orthodox Church says it rests in a guarded chamber in Aksum, watched by a single lifelong guardian. No proof has ever confirmed any theory. The ark simply vanished, and its mystery has only grown with time. Even today, the question remains: if the ark still exists somewhere in the world, what would happen if it were found again?